Welcome back to Deadline Detroit. I'm Craig Fahle. Glad to have you with me on the Craig Fahle Show as we broadcast live from the Mackinac Policy Conference hosted by the Detroit Regional Chamber. We're at the Grand Hotel, and I'm with Congressman Andy Levin from Michigan's 9th Congressional District. Welcome, sir. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks, Craig. It's great to be with you.
Well, it's always got to be nice to be up in Mackinac Island anyway, back in the home state. It's, we actually had a rare bit of bipartisanship here in Michigan recently when it came to the auto insurance reform bill that passed.
Right.
What's going on in Washington in that regard? Doesn't seem like you guys are getting the same sort of traction.
Well, we're passing a lot of bills in the House that we feel strongly about as the Democratic majority, and I think that's super newsworthy.
Yeah.
The American people had one referendum in 2018, which is called the United States House of Representatives. All of us, all 435 seats are open every 2 years, and they overwhelmingly elected a Democratic majority, and we're delivering.
Mm-hmm.
We've passed the reforms to our democracy, our H.R. 1. We've passed a lot of health care bills to shore up the Affordable Care Act and reduce the cost of prescription drugs. We passed the Equality Act to really bring equality to LGBTQ people in this country. It doesn't get a lot of attention because people just like the fighting. But in terms of bipartisanship, I have to tell you, I'm personally doing a lot that's bipartisan. Let me start on a very local level. We, in Michigan's 9th District, we have more Iraqi-born people than any other district in the country, and Michigan as a whole has more than other states. ICE started deporting Iraqi-born people after President Trump took office, and en masse, dozens of people were detained. There's about 1,000 people still out there who we don't even know who they are that could be deported on a moment's notice. And so I'm working with Republicans to stop these deportations and try to get a day in court for these Iraqi-born people. Just the most American of things. A day in court, individual justice. Let me have my case heard before an immigration judge. John Molinar is partnering with me on this. He's not here at Mackinac, but he's from a Republican from Midland. We have Republicans from Nebraska and other states on this bill. So where we can, we're working bipartisan. And let me just say, of my two committee assignments, one's education and labor, where, Democrats, we have a lot of strong beliefs about we need to raise our minimum wage, that we should deal with these college loans, this crisis, that every kid deserves a great public school education. The Republicans don't agree with that all the time. But my other committee, Foreign Affairs, and I have Republicans on all my major efforts on foreign affairs. For example, a Republican from suburban St. Louis is my co-sponsor on my bill about human rights in Burma. So, we're trying to be bipartisan. I've got a Republican as my co-sponsor on a bill to tell the president, you do not have authorization to go to war with Iran. So, on global things and local things, we try to work bipartisanly when we can. And by the way, just today, we had a bipartisan press conference out here about working together to protect our Great Lakes. And that
is one area that you guys have done really, really well on. I mean, there was funding, again, that was put back in the budget for the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, which is a huge deal. We got Army Corps of Engineers approval of a plan for Asian carp just, yesterday, I believe.
We're going to all go out and look at the site.
When you look at that from a regional perspective, you're talking about neighboring states that all obviously share this stewardship role that we have over the Great Lakes.
Yes.
Is that where this progress can be made? I mean, are those relationships that you're forming now starting to bear fruit?
I think so. I mean, the president in every budget has proposed cutting 90% of the funding of the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, which is basically zeroing it out. And our Republican colleagues have been terrific in standing with us and saying, no, Mr. Trump, this is important. It's important to our economy. It's important to our environment. It's important to our basic survival, like safe drinking water. So It's been a real bipartisan effort, and we hope it continues to be.
When I was talking about the bipartisanship, obviously the Senate is not taking up many of the bills that are being passed by the House. The president will then put out a tweet that basically says the House isn't getting anything done, the Democrats aren't doing anything, which is complete baloney.
Right.
Obviously, it is happening. So there's that logjam that you have there in terms of getting this legislation even considered on the other side of the Capitol, let alone getting to the president's desk. What can you do to overcome that? And is this something that is doable?
Well, I think there are two things we need to do. Number one, we need to, as this new majority in the House, really carry out our vision, big ideas that the American people said they wanted. So at the same time that I'm trying to find a way to work with Republicans to shore up the Affordable Care Act and reduce the cost of health care and prescription drugs, I was out there on the lawn, a proud original co-sponsor of Medicare for All. So we need to pass our bills like the Equality Act that the Republicans will never go along with. And because ultimately the American people need to decide, do they like this vision of universal public education, higher wages, retirement security that the Democrats are pushing hard for? And if so, please, American people, give us a Senate and a president that will do these things with us. And then at the same time, we need to see where we can work together and actually govern. So I think on infrastructure, we're still hoping that we'll get something done, even though the president had his temper tantrum and said, basically, as long as you all are investigating me, I won't do anything with you, which sort of fails to comprehend the Constitution of the United States. Really, pretty much the Congress is supposed to pass legislation and then oversee the administration's execution of that legislation.
Sure.
That's sort of the two parts of our job. So he just didn't have any oversight the first 2 years, and he doesn't like it, but that's not going to end.
Look, I got to ask you this, though, because it's got to be frustrating, because I know that there are smart people in Washington on both sides of the aisle that have been working on a lot of these issues, but when you get into a situation where you unilaterally, in terms of the executive, are saying that, we're going to slap tariffs on products, and now coming up with an aid package for farmers to basically pay their way through this stuff. I know that there are people on the other side that think this is a horrible idea, but nobody is willing to speak up about it on that side. What's it going to take for the Republicans and the smart people in the room to actually sit there and say, you know what, this is just stupid and wrong?
I don't know the answer to that.
That's my opinion, by the way, not
right. But
else's.
If you look at, it's a very informed opinion from my point of view. But if you look at the situation the Republicans are in, I guess what you would say is that President Trump has never come close to majority approval, but he does have very strong approval from the base of the Republican Party. And I agree with you that Republicans should say, whoa, when our Constitution is at stake, I have to put country above party. When we're talking about slapping tariffs helter-skelter on every other country, including our best friends, I have to stand up and say, that's not really smart economic policy or trade policy. I don't know what it'll take for them to do that. They fear being primaried. You may notice that the ones who say they're not running again are more truthful about it.
Well, Justin Amash, obviously not afraid whenever you're
right. Well, Justin Amash, and I have co-sponsored one bill with him. I have always respected Justin Amash, and I'll tell you why. Because he is someone who has very clear beliefs, and he sticks to them, and he explains them. And so he's a libertarian, really, and he's gone against the president. I don't agree with him on many things, but I do know that he's going to be principled and make decisions based on his beliefs and then do a good job of explaining them. I think if every member of Congress was that way, the Congress would be a much better place. So in that way, I have a lot of respect for Justin, and I think what he did was brave. I mean, he simply read the Mueller report and admitted what the contents were, which is that in 10 instances, the president obstructed justice or tried to obstruct justice. And that's a very grave matter for our democracy.
Mueller came out and said as much today, made a statement about this closing down, and basically saying, I'm retiring, I'm out, I'm going back to the private sector. But he made a statement about it today saying,
Yes, he
look,
did.
if we could have said that he was innocent, we would have done so. He didn't say that. That just adds a little more fuel to the fire. Is impeachment a viable option at this point in time?
I'm not saying I'm for impeachment or I'm against impeachment. We have to remember that impeachment is a political as well as a legal matter.
Sure.
I am on record as saying, in my personal view, this president has committed multiple impeachable offenses. But as to how we should proceed as the House of Representatives, we took an oath to uphold the Constitution and investigate the administration. This administration has, in my view, gone astray, not just in the matters that the Mueller report covered, but in the emoluments clause in a president enriching himself personally. But what's the point of proceeding with impeachment when the public and the Republicans in the legislature aren't ready? Impeachment to succeed needs to be a bipartisan thing. So here's my analogy. It's May of 1973.
Mm-hmm.
In May of 1973, the public wasn't for impeaching Nixon, and the Republicans in the Congress weren't. But they formed the Watergate Select Committee. And over the next year, the hearings there on live television told the American people the story, plus other legal shoes dropped. Well, we have other legal shoes that are going to drop here, too. Like, what's the cause of the bulk of the redaction in the Mueller report? Ongoing grand jury matters,
Sure.
right? His New York state taxes likely to come out fairly soon. We need to get his federal taxes. All these things. So if we have I know Mr. Mueller said today he's not going to testify. We need to tell him to testify. We need Mr. McGahn to testify. There are other people who should come forward. The American people can't be expected to read a 480-some page report.
It certainly seems as if some of the strategy here is to delay this. I mean, by just ignoring subpoenas that are coming from your committees.
Right.
Some of the strategy is to just to delay this until get past the next election, and then who knows
you're
what
right.
happens.
If the
How long can we
administration
play that game?
continues to stonewall and refuse to cooperate at all, that's a constitutional crisis unto itself. But right now, the initial rulings from federal judges have supported the House position 100%. And I'm not saying it's time yet, but I'm not scared of impeachment, and if that's what we need to do, then we'll do it. We need to keep the main thing, though.
Is it growing, though? It seems like it's bubbling up a little more to the surface.
Yeah, people get nervous. People get in a rush. We have to be sober and serious and intentional and not partisan about this. This is way above Democrats and Republicans. This is the basic health of our democracy. Look how Mr. Mueller ended his statement today. He pointedly came back to the Russia matter, and he said, Russia interfered in our elections in a way that was very damaging, and every American needs to pay attention to this. Whoa. That's a little bit different than the president shouting, no collusion, exoneration, nothing happened. I mean, we need to tackle the security of our elections.
How do you counter that constant message, though, that's coming out there? Because every tweet gets attention, whether it's him saying that the Democrats aren't doing anything in Congress, which we know, as we pointed out earlier, is just not accurate. It's him saying that this didn't happen. There are people that are willing to believe this dude no matter what he says.
There are
despite the stuff that's right in front of their eyes. How do you counter somebody with that type of a megaphone? Because it's bigger than I've ever seen.
Let me give you the things that may be contradictory, and you can tell me whether it makes sense.
Let's go.
Number one, Donald Trump has been the greatest innovator in communicating with the American people since Franklin Roosevelt and the fireside chats. How many Twitter followers does he have?
I'm ashamed to say I'm one. But
that's like cocaine. It's directly to the, just think about it, though. For his followers, I got a cousin in L.A. who I won't name, who's one of his followers. When he tweets at 5 a.m., this is unmediated. They're getting the president of the United States with the misspellings and the ridiculous capitalizations, proving it's really him or whatever. There's no New York Times in between them and the president, no CBS News. They get it straight, man. And that was a really powerful thing. On the other hand, there was just this analysis that came out today that his efficiency on Twitter, whatever you call it, is gone way down, and that his constant barrage is exhausting people. I have a little faith in you, in the Fourth Estate, we have to keep getting the word out. We have to be on social media too, combined with working with the real media and telling the truth to the American people. I have a lot of faith in the American people ultimately, and so I think if we get the truth out
to run for Congress, I mean, you have to run for Congress in this day and age.
I'll tell you, it's so amazing to be a new member of Congress. You go to Washington, it's really, these buildings are my workplace. These colleagues are my colleagues. These like historic figures. But the best part of being in Congress is when you fly home and you go to that Lenten fish fry at the American Legion in Berkeley, the town where I grew up in, and you just sit down at some table with people and like, tell, what's the deal? What should we be doing? What are your concerns?
Let's end with this then.
Yeah.
What are they worried about right now?
The activist types want to talk about this impeachment stuff. 90% of people want to talk about raising the standard of living for working people, how people say this economy is so great, but it's not in my life. What's going on here? People don't have $400 if there's an emergency. Young people don't feel like they can get married. They don't feel like they can buy a house. They're buried in student loan debt. Anybody can say that this is low unemployment. This ain't the American dream. And that's why I ran for Congress, is to make a good economy mean that it's great for the regular working person again, not that it's good for super rich people who own 90% of the stocks on Wall Street. So that's what people care about. They want to talk about, how can I pay these healthcare bills? How can I pay for this prescription drug for my kids? And I can relate. I mean, I got 2 kids with Crohn's disease. I just spent with one of my young adult sons an hour on the phone duking it out with the insurance company about he can't pay. He's just turning 26. He's going to be off of our coverage from the Affordable Care Act. That's a horrible cliff, that these kids face. And when you think about it, he can't have that 20-something thing that a lot of kids have, that they can leave one job and go travel somewhere for a few months before they take another. He has Crohn's disease.
Yeah.
He can never be without health insurance. It's like a prison. And in so many ways, all public policy has imprisoned young people and regular working people. So, I'm all about, I'm the vice chair of the Education and Labor Committee. And what is my task there? It's about raising the minimum wage. It's about letting workers be free to form unions and bargain collectively again. It's about protecting the pensions we have and expanding Social Security for people who don't have any, quote unquote pension. So we've got a lot of work to do, and the focus should be on shoring up the standard of living of working people.
All right,
That's it.
We'll leave it right there. Congressman Andy Levin, we appreciate your time, sir. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Craig. It's great to be with you.
This is the Craig Fahle Show on Deadline Detroit. Lots more interviews coming up.